Every single year, ships collide with each other in this stretch of water dozens of times. None of these collisions are accidents, and almost none of them are reported in the news where you live. This is the South China Sea, and what's happening here right now will shape the price of almost everything in your home over the next decade. I'm the host of Supply Chain Daily. I've spent years inside the global supply chain, moving goods, managing routes, dealing with the kinds of disruptions most people never hear about until they show up as empty shelves or higher prices. And what I want to do on this channel is take the supply chain stories that make the news and explain what's actually happening underneath them, from someone who's working on the inside. Today's story is one most coverage gets wrong, so let's get right into it. Roughly 1/3 of all global maritime trade, by some estimates more than $3 trillion worth of goods every single year, passes through the South China Sea. That's electronics from Taiwan and South Korea, oil from the Middle East going to Japan, manufactured goods coming out of Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and the vast majority of what China itself exports to the rest of the world. If this stretch of water becomes too dangerous to sail through, even for a few weeks, you're looking at a global supply shock that would make the 2021 Suez Canal blockage look like a minor inconvenience. We're not anywhere near that yet. But every collision, every confrontation, every contested resupply mission moves us a fraction of a step closer. Here's the situation, as briefly as I can tell it. The South China Sea is bordered by China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. International law, specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, gives each of these countries control over the waters extending 200 nautical miles from their coastline. That's called an exclusive economic zone. The problem is that China claims something different. It draws a line on the map, sometimes called the 9-dash line, that loops around almost the entire South China Sea, including waters that are clearly inside other countries' EEZs. In 2016, an international tribunal ruled this claim has no legal basis. China rejected the ruling and has spent the last decade enforcing the claim anyway. Which brings us to the ship crashes. Most of these collisions are not warships ramming each other. The crashes that have been making the news involve Chinese Coast Guard vessels and water cannons hitting Philippine resupply boats. You know, those small, lightly built craft trying to deliver food, water, and rotation crews to Filipino Marines stationed on a grounded warship at 2nd Thomas Shoal. The Philippines has soldiers stationed on a ship called the Sierra Madre, which they intentionally beached on 2nd Thomas Shoal in 1999 to assert territorial control. Not a surprise, but those soldiers need to eat. So the Philippines runs supply missions, usually with civilian boats, every few weeks. China considers these missions a violation of its claim. So Chinese Coast Guard vessels intercept them, sometimes blocking, sometimes ramming, sometimes blasting them with high-pressure water cannons strong enough to break windows and injure crew. This is the part most coverage misses. These are not random skirmishes. They are calibrated. Each side knows exactly how far to push without triggering the kind of incident that would force the United States, which is bound by a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, to get involved militarily. It's a slow-motion test of how much pressure China can apply without crossing the line. Here's what most news coverage doesn't tell you, and it's the part that actually affects supply chains. Commercial shipping companies, the ones moving your iPhone, your car parts, your coffee, watches this region very carefully. Every confrontation gets factored into something called a war risk premium on marine insurance. When tensions rise, that premium goes up. Higher insurance gets passed to the shipper passes it to the importer, and eventually it shows up at the till. Right now, the war risk premium for South China Sea routes is still relatively low because no commercial vessel has been seriously attacked. But shipping companies are already quietly preparing alternative routes. Some carriers are looking at running boats further east, around the Philippines, adding several days to a voyage. I know that sounds insignificant, doesn't it? A 2-day delay across millions of containers a year compounds into billions of dollars of additional cost. And we're already seeing carriers price that risk into long-term contracts being signed today. The second thing the news rarely covers is that China is using these confrontations to normalize its presence in disputed waters. Each unchallenged incident makes the next one easier. Each new island built on a reef and turned into a military base shifts the facts on the ground. Slowly, the contested zone shrinks. and the cost of pushing back militarily or commercially grows every year. If you want to track this story without relying on headlines, here's what to watch. First, watch the resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal. The frequency, the size of the boats used, and whether the Philippines starts using its navy instead of civilian craft, any escalation there is a leading indicator. Second, watch marine insurance markets. Lloyd's of London publishes war risk listings. When the South China Sea gets formally upgraded as a high-risk area, insurance costs jump and shipping routes change within days. And third, watch the construction work on Chinese-controlled reefs. Satellite imagery from organizations like the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative is publicly available and tells you more about Chinese intent than any government statement. The ship crashes are not the story. They are the symptom. The story is the slow, deliberate rewrite of who controls one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth, and how much that's eventually going to cost the rest of us. This is the kind of story I'm going to be covering on this channel. Supply chain news, but explained from the inside by someone who's actually working in it. If that's useful to you, consider subscribing, because I've got more like this coming each week. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. If you've worked in shipping, in defense, or anywhere this story touches, drop your perspective below. The comments on this channel are a real source of insight for me, and I read all of them. Until next time, keep an eye on what's moving.